Susan Demas, the executive editor of Lincoln Square, and joining me, as always, on Monday is our founding editor, Lisa Senecal. Lisa,
Good
thank you.
morning. Oh, always happy to be here, even on a Monday morning. Really happy to see everybody joining us this morning.
Well, we had quite a weekend, as we always do,
Yeah.
but things are going a little differently than they have for about the last decade with Trump, where there are finally some cracks showing in his base. And no, it's not really over that awful budget bill or ICE, being turned into his personal police force, but it is about something that's been with us for a long time, the Epstein Files. And Trump really rode this, with his base for a long time. He was going to be the one to release them. It's a huge conspiracy, that the deep state is running everything. It's a ring of pedophiles, and the perception on the right has always been that it's liberals and Democrats, despite all of the evidence that we know to the
Yeah.
contrary. That's just a lot of very powerful people, who many of whom are well known on the right, perhaps including someone in the White House.
Could be.
Uh, but to make a long story short, now that Trump is in power and he made a big show with his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, of bringing out the files and we're going to put this to rest, all of a sudden, it's not that much of a priority for him for whatever reason. But because this has been such a defining issue for people on the right, Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones and so many Maga influencers, Nick Fuentes, who is a neo-Nazi, they have really turned on Trump over this. And they're not letting go of it either. And Trump does not seem to be handling this very well if you read his social media posts, as I'm sure you have, Lisa.
Yeah, this is not the first time that Trump has decided he's going to make a public statement, usually through Truth Social, um, where he thinks he's gonna put an issue to bed, and all he really does is completely contradict the public statements that his administration has already put out. Bondi, put out the statement last week that, and this is I encourage everybody to go read Mark Jacobs' Stop the Press's newsletter from last week when he talked about the language in the press release that Bondi put out about there not being a client list. The way most of the media is covering this is saying that she said that there was no client list. Well, what the document says is there was no incriminating, and client list is in quotes, which
Hmm.
is really a weird thing to do unless you're trying to say there was nothing there are no documents in these files named client list. And could they be called something else? Could it be flight logs? Could it be names with certain underage girls next to them? Could these people not have legally been clients because they weren't actually exchanging any money?
Hmm.
And then the other word that's doing an awful lot of heavy lifting in that is incriminating. And
Hmm.
who's to judge what is and is not incriminating? I wouldn't trust Pam Bondi to do that if she is trying to cover for people. But anyway, that was already suspect in the way that they put that out. But then over the weekend, Trump said essentially, well, there is a client list, except it's a client list that was made up by the Democrats. And
Right. It's
wi-
Obama's fault. It's
right,
Biden.
it's Obama's fault. Clinton helped
Right.
create the
Clinton.
climate list because, we've always got to bring Hillary Clinton back into things when we need a boogeyman. But so Bondi has said there's no client list. Trump is saying, yes, there is a client list, but it's made up by the Democrats, which immediately made me wonder whose name or whose names are on this client list that Trump now seems to be trying to inoculate himself from by
Mhm.
saying that the Democrats made it up.
Right.
So
And
he's fearful something is going to be released. and it is going to be incriminating. And so you have to start trying to get your base to believe that, yes, this thing is going to be released. Maybe it's going to look bad for certain people who may or may not occupy the Oval Office, but don't believe your eyes once again because this is, Russia, 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 except this time is pedophilia.
Right. And I think we should probably talk a little bit about why this is such a flashpoint for his base. And, this has been in the making for about a decade. And it really, it goes back to first when Hillary Clinton was running in 2016, there was the Pizzagate conspiracy rooted in the released emails where allegedly it showed that because they were talking about pizza orders, cheese pizza actually stands for child porn. I mean, really, you have to get into the weeds. It's weird stuff, but that's what conspiracies are. That kind of morphed into QAnon during Trump's first term, and that became, such a flashpoint. Really took on, I think, a whole new meaning with COVID, and just this idea that the deep state is out to get you. There is a ring of pedophiles that's really controlling things. We need to count on Trump because he's going to root them out, and there's very violent language that's associated with it. We're going to set up the guillotines. Trump's going to take care of all your enemies. It's all the liberals, all the Democrats are trying to control you with, this vaccine stuff. And this became just so enmeshed with MAGA and the Trump movement. And this idea that Trump is kind of the Christ-like figure who's going to, set all the wrongs right. And now we're still seeing under Trump that the Epstein list is not being released. And you would think that this would be the sort of thing that he could just, wave away like he's able to with FEMA's, just awful response in Texas. People seem to be able to accept that. But because this is kind of the defining conspiracy of Trumpism, it's been really interesting to see that some of Trump's just stalwart supporters, those people who are so influential on the right, like Charlie Kirk, they're just not buying it. I think they see that their their base, their way to make money, there is no upside for them in excusing Trump on this.
Yeah, it's really unnerving whenever there are a bunch of these really just repulsive, repugnant individuals in the MAGA sphere who I suddenly agree with on something. Dan Bongino's another one. Over the weekend, he was threatening apparently to resign and wants to see Pam Bondi fired. So there is a huge amount of pressure coming from MAGA, and it's one of the dangers of stoking conspiracy theories and telling people that you are going to be the one to rip back the curtains and expose the truth. And, there are secrets being hidden from the masses, and, you alone can fix it. And then you get in there and you have the power that Trump has right now. He has tremendous, huge power in the courts, both houses of Congress and the presidency, and yet he cannot now reveal the deep state, um, conspiracies going on that are hiding the truth. And it just, when you have indoctrinated people into believing that you have the power to do that, and then suddenly you want to be able to change directions and say, "Folks, there's nothing to see here." Um, it's very hard for them to accept because they supported you based on believing that there was a lot to see there.
Yeah.
And now they're not seeing it. And conspiracy theorists at the heart of those beliefs is that they want to be the ones who are proven right and have the knowledge that nobody else had or that others were trying to keep from them. And they're being thwarted in that payoff that they thought they were going to get if Trump got elected. And it's not going over well.
No. And, there are a lot of conspiracy theories out there. Some of them are
So
relatively
many.
harmless. Who shot JFK, although that's been kind of mixed in with all of this because remember, he was going to release all of the JFK files as well. Martin Luther King,
I thought it
he's
was
gonna.
wasn't it Ted Cruz's father who
Yes,
shot
yes,
JFK? I thought yeah,
and
thought we'd already
right,
solved that one. So, Oliver
right,
Stone, sorry. You really missed it in your film. It was actually Ted Cruz's father. But
yep.
anyway, we digress.
But this, I was just gonna quickly say that with this, pedophile ring, QAnon conspiracy theory, it's extremely violent, and it's basically Trump gets to play the angel of God and decide, who lives, who dies. And, when you have people that wrapped up in something that is that nefarious, um, y- this has been really the justification why there has to be so much cruelty, why we have to have these ICE roundups. And really these people are cheering to go way beyond just, rounding up, you know, illegal immigrants or whoever else. They really want to target, people on the left, all of the members of the deep state, all of their political enemies. And the justification is, well, these are the worst of the worst. These are terrible people. They are molesting children. And so we have no choice but to do this massive purge. And to have that being a prominent theory of a political party, the Republican Party these days, that's kind of where we're at. And, I think for a long time, there's been an effort in the mainstream media to say, nope, it's just a few people, there are wackos on the left. Look at AOC. But, AOC is not calling to round up Republicans en masse and deport them or worse. Uh, but Trump, true to form, is always looking for a way out, always looking to say, "Hey, look over there." And, like clockwork, he puts out the tweet, "Oh, I'm gonna deport that awful Rosie O'Donnell. She's been terrible for years. Let's just get rid of her." And it's so easy to say, "Uh, another distraction. Who cares? Rosie O'Donnell, when was the last time you saw her in anything?" But it really is the Trump, playbook on so many levels. First of all, I want you to just get all in a tizzy about something, so I'm going to tweet it. And then it's a trial balloon because, just like during his campaign where he was saying, "I'm gonna round up the worst of the worst criminals, all of the gang bangers, we're gonna send them back to Mexico, to Central America, and you're not gonna miss these people, so you're gonna be okay with me sending out the jackboots." Now it's, here's an actress, you may not really like her, I've been fighting with her for years. If it's okay for me to strip her citizenship when, she was born in Long Island, there's no question that she's an American citizen. If you're okay with that, what else are you gonna be okay with?
Yeah, and it's the idea that, Trump is the state, right? He does not like Rosie O'Donnell. She says she doesn't like him. There is no love lost between these 2. This has been going on for more than a decade now. He has said absolutely disgusting, awful personal attacks against her. It helps him do this that, she is a gay woman, so, what better target, the only thing he could have hoped for was that she would also be Black or Hispanic, but, he's gonna have to accept the white gay woman to be a target in this case. But but this is Trump saying that if you oppose me, you are anti-American. You are basically committing crimes against the state by saying my policies are wrong.
Mhm.
And even though Rosie O'Donnell left the United States after the 2024 election and has been living in Ireland since then. He is still going to float this trial balloon, as you said, to see just how devoted, especially his base, still is. Can I get people to rally behind the idea that my purpose is so just that anybody who opposes my policies does not deserve to have American citizenship and should
Mhm.
be able to have that stripped from them and have them deported. And if you get people to accept that against Rosie O'Donnell, well, you and I aren't in a good place, Susan. Pretty much anybody who is speaking out publicly against this administration um, needs to, I'm not going to say worry, because if you're really worried about these things, then you're going to change your conduct.
Mhm.
And yeah, fuck that. We're not
But
gonna
that's
change anything we're doing and saying, because of what Trump is doing and saying.
right.
It's more important that people are standing up and speaking out, and there have to be more and more people because you can't strip all of us of our citizenship and deport us. And the more that people are public in their opposition to Trump, the more uncomfortable it is when people do get disappeared because they had a public face or they were being outspoken in their communities. So when those people are punished in some way, people are jarred by it and upset and offended, and action happens as a result of it. So I think partially um, O'Donnell being sort of off people's radar right now has
Mm,
made her an easier target for Trump because people haven't been rallying around her.
right.
This is gonna get more attention from his base than
Mhm.
it is from everybody else.
Right. I mean, there are any number of people he could have gone after, but he's not going after George Clooney, who's a huge
Right.
Democrat, but, still grosses, millions upon millions of dollars in the theater. And, people like to go see him,
Oh, and I'm
uh,
sure Jim Jordan has been lobbying hard recently for, for Trump to go after Clooney. Just a
right.
guess, but I think he really does not appreciate the Surviving Ohio State documentary that came out about the abuse and cover up that Jim Jordan was perfectly happy to be a part of for many years, covering up, oh, sexual abuse, you know, clo back closing the loop on this, a cover up of sexual abuse, of
Actual.
actual sexual abuse that went on for decades, that there is no way that Jim Jordan didn't know about. But, you're right, Clooney is not on the, public list of targets that Trump is going after.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
really, they want everyone to start thinking, if I show up to the next protest, I was just at No Kings. What if I'm on a list?
Mhm.
Maybe my citizenship isn't, on lockdown as much as I thought. Because who among us back, however long you go, doesn't have birthright citizenship in our family unless, you are native. That's just the way this country works. We are a land of immigrants. And so you know, that's another part of how autocrats work. They want you to be scared. They want you not to speak out. They want to give you, they want you to take pause in that. And I, just want to clarify all of us here at Lincoln Square, we're not going to shut up. We're not going to bend the knee to Trump. So, we know if if there's a list, we're probably on it. And that's okay because you have to stand up in times like this, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, absolutely. There just isn't, I think, and this is true for, so many of the people watching this, this just isn't a time where there are options, right? You can't, for so many years, we when we were all going through school and we learned about the Holocaust, and everyone, oh, like, how could that have possibly happened? How could the German people not have stood up and stopped this from happening?
Mhm.
And, we see we're living through how these things happen, how a populace is willing to be too silent too often, out of fear, or for a lot of people just not paying attention. And so for those of us who are paying attention, and that includes everybody watching here, it means we have to be vocal about
Right.
these things, because that's how more people are going to find out what really is happening in this country right now, and we should be alarmed. We
Yes.
are beyond the point of maybe what he says he's not really going to do, because as Tom Homan, um,
The head
or,
of ICE.
yeah, the head of once again, like, blurting out the truth when they don't really mean to do it. Tom Homan came out and said, "We're racially profiling, the people that we are deporting, and that's how racially profiling is how we're identifying the people who we are,
Mhm.
um, grabbing off the
Right.
streets,"
And
which
and
a judge immediately said, "Well, thank you very much for admitting that. We're going to now put a freeze on your ability, if you still follow any court orders, you're not gonna be able to snatch people off the street based on the color of their skin."
right. And this is not a time for us to say, "Well, duh, we know that they're doing it." It's it is it is very significant to say in a court, "This is what we're doing." And to say we can act with absolute authority to do so, we can just admit it. It is a wild time in US history. And, I think back a lot because I happen to have been born in Skokie, Illinois, and that's where I grew up. And at one time was the home of the most Holocaust survivors, in the US per capita.
Wow.
And for me, I got to grow up hearing from survivors, and that was just a big part of my childhood. And the Nazis, marched on Skokie right before I was born. And so the idea that this could ever happen in this country, where I could be living in a place where you could literally be snatched off the street, and there is a Gestapo that's being run out of the White House. Um, this is something that I never, ever thought would happen, and I don't think that very many of us did. And it's not a coincidence that there are very few Holocaust survivors left to tell us how this all happens, and why we, can't let it start again. And there have been so many atrocities, but the fact that we're at a place where there is just such explicit racism, and people who are just so comfortable saying, "Yeah, let's just disappear people because they're Hispanic. They don't belong here." I mean, to hear people saying New York isn't really an American city because there aren't enough white people there anymore, and these are people who work in the Trump administration. It's just startling. And so, you can see that, but the cruelty is just across the board, because what we've seen in this response to these Texas floods, where it doesn't matter if you are black, white, brown, whatever, this government really does not care about you. And Texas, there's no redder, state in the country, maybe Florida, but Texas has just been that crown jewel of republicanism for so long. And yet FEMA didn't rush to help them either. There those the horrific reporting by the New York Times and others, that what a third of all calls went, 2/3 of all calls went unanswered. They just did not care. And how many of those 129 people who died maybe wouldn't have if they would have picked up the phone?
Yeah, and Christy Nome over the weekend, being asked questions about this, obviously, her answers don't make any sense. So if you take any time at all to listen to what she's saying, that FEMA needs to be completely reorganized, basically broken apart, and the responsibilities all be shifted to the states. So she's saying that in one breath, and then in her next breath, she's saying that she has reorganized FEMA so that all of these decisions about during emergencies come to her, so she can quickly review them and make decisions on all emergencies happening. So, are you centralizing all of it
Mhm.
in federal FEMA as it currently stands, but you're making it even more centralized? Or are you decentralizing everything and saying that this is now the state's responsibility? But because those calls were going unanswered and decisions weren't being made in a timely way, she wants to be able to say, well, I know that they were because I'm the one who makes all of the decisions at FEMA. And I know that I make those decisions quickly. So we can't be we can't be challenged in how we responded to this. It just doesn't hold water. You can't you can have one or the other of those. I also don't believe that you can have one person responsible for making all decisions and that those can still be made in a timely way because
Mhm.
that's just not possible. One person can't do that. And no FEMA director in history has ever before pretended that that could be done.
Mhm.
It's why you have highly credible, skilled professionals working in federal government who can handle making those decisions quickly and who you can empower and put faith and trust in because you know that they're up to the job, which
And
is
we
the
we should
absolute
say
opposite. Go
and we
ahead.
should note that the Trump administration has been firing many of those people with
Right.
abandon, so
Right. And not just in FEMA. We know he's doing this across the board in the federal government, that the goal is absolutely not to have competent people in charge, which is why you have an RFK Jr. at Health, and you've got Kristi Noem at FEMA, and you've got Tom Homan at ICE, and on and on and on. Hegseth at Defense, because they don't want competent people in charge because as things crumble, authoritarians are able to grasp more control if they have a fearful populace who feels like everything around them is crumbling down around their ears, and that the only way that people can get what it is that they need from government is if they are loyal to the authoritarian. And Trump knows it. I mean,
mhm,
we very often want to be able to say that the guy is not smart, and he isn't smart in an awful lot of ways, but he's cunning, and he understands this. He knows how to manipulate people. He was he was raised to do this. He was raised to be this man,
right,
and has had training since he was in his very early years through his father and some through his mother as well. And he knows how to do it now, and he's doing it very effectively.
right. And there's a playbook for authoritarians. These are not new ideas. And if you haven't read the ongoing series that we're publishing from our Lincoln Project colleague Trygve Olsen, you should. He has been all over the world. He has seen, from Milosevic on and on, how authoritarians operate. What they do to seize power, how they keep it. And Trump knows this. And there is nothing that he has done that's out of the ordinary for, what Orban or Putin, have done in their countries too. And in case, like many of us, if you're wondering, how did the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, how come she's in charge of FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security? All you have to do is watch her on TV. She is as Trumpy as they come. there's no fact that she cannot deflect with utter bullshit. She is very good at it. Not good at her job, but very good at just lying with abandon, and that's what she's done over this Texas situation. It is, frightening to see that not even this scale of mass death, which, natural disasters happen. Climate change makes things worse. There's no conspiracy there, but how we react to it is within our control. And having people in charge who don't care and are incompetent has deadly consequences. And this is probably something that we are going to have to deal with over and over again. uh, and it really doesn't matter where you live because, whether you're in the Midwest and there are tornadoes or you're down, south on the East Coast with Florida and the Carolinas, there are hurricanes, wildfires across the West. This is why we have a federal government to help us. And we do not have a federal government that's very interested in that. So these are very difficult times. And, there is there nobody can step in for what the federal government can do because they have the resources to help people in need, to get you water and shelter and food. But unfortunately, we're facing a situation where we're on our own and we have to depend on one another. And, that's why building a community is important. It's wonderful and heartbreaking to see in our chats people who are just trying to help each other through this, one disaster after another. And sadly, sometimes that's all that we can do these days.
Yeah, if the Trump administration really cared about decentralizing government and having all of these different services based on the state level, they would be funding those things. And we're
Mhm.
seeing the absolute opposite of that. We see it in Trump's, big ugly bill that passed, that it is defunding SNAP and Medicaid, and those holes now in the budget mean that they have to be filled in other ways. So you're going to see really terrible decisions that have to be made on the state level about, are you gonna defund community college so you can put additional money into Medicaid? Are you going to cut back on, different types of state assistance that have been available, whether it's housing vouchers or whatever? Somebody has to lose every time you provide additional support somewhere else, or you try to fill a massive budget gap that the federal government has created. And in no states more than the red ones are they going to feel this. And it's the responsibility of um, organizations like Lincoln Square and all of us and the mainstream media and the Democratic Party and moral people everywhere, churches, different community organizations, all need to be out there talking about making sure people understand that these are not state cuts that are being made, especially in these blue states that are going to be impacted. These are federal cuts made by the Trump administration that have horrific fallout on the state level. And now everyone has to scramble to try to take care of the people in their states. But this pain is being inflicted by the Trump administration
Right.
intentionally.
And we know what the playbook is going to be for Trump. He's going to try and whip up all of the, right-wing influencers, and this is going to be the message, whether it's on TikTok or Fox News. Look at what the awful blue state governments are doing to their people. They're responsible for the cuts. Of course, it's not Trump. And it's more important than ever. I'm a journalist by training, and I've been doing this for decades. And I just believe in reporting the facts. And the facts are is that these cuts are coming from Trump's budget. He signed it. It was passed solely with Republican votes, and that is why you don't have health care. That is why your child's education budget is being cut to make up for the fact that suddenly these states don't have money coming in for Medicaid for their healthcare programs. And the mistake that I see happening over and over again in the mainstream media is, yes, they are reporting on what's happening, these cuts, and they're very poignant stories. But what's missing is, why is this happening? And it's very clear why they're so reticent to report that is because they don't want to anger the Trump administration. And this is coming at the corporate level. And this, you can see it. CBS, ABC, these are huge corporations that settled with the Trump administration over bogus lawsuits that, really take away the power of the media. But they did that because they're businesses. And it's better for business to deal with the king and to not upset him. And that trickles down to very good reporters who are told, no, you can't say that. No, you can't write that editorial against Trump. Something bad could happen. And so it's our job at Lincoln Square to say, this is why it's happening. And this is what we can do about it. And we really appreciate all of you and those of you who are subscribers. And if you're tuning in and you're not, please, you can try it out with a free subscription. The vast majority of our lives and our written content is free because we want it to be, disseminated far and wide, share with your friends. But we have a lovely group of people that put this together, our staff, and we do like to pay them. So we do have paid subscriptions. And I think you'll find that what we do is so valuable. You're going to want to pay for Rick Wilson's wonderful columns like you wrote over the weekend that appeal to the people who are still in the Trump administration after all this time. You're not doing the right thing. You're not stopping something worse. You need to resign now. You want to be able to read that. And it's such an honor for us to do this work. And we so appreciate you being here and building this community with us.
It is an incredible community. I was thrilled to be a part of it for almost 3 years and, love coming
You built
back.
this.
Well, there
Let's be clear. We are here because of Lisa.
oh god, well, there were a lot of other people involved, and I appreciate that so much, Susan. I'm thrilled that the reins are in your hands and that, we get to keep having these conversations 'cause, um, an outlet is important, to be able to, stay sane in these times. So I appreciate still, being invited back and to see so many familiar faces or names in the chat and comments in the chat. So thank you everybody, for being here and being part of the work because um, it's organizations like Lincoln Square that are going to, make the difference. It has to be a patchwork, all coming together across the country, many different organizations and millions of individuals who are willing to do the work. So if you are able to support the work, please do, because it is a dedicated, incredibly hardworking, overworked group of folks at Lincoln Square Media who are doing the essential work for our democracy. So support it if you can.
Thank you so much for being here on a very early Monday morning. But we love doing this at the beginning of the week. And again, in the chats, in the comments, let us know what you'd like us to be talking about. And let us know what you would like us to cover and bring guests on because we really rely on you to tell us this isn't being covered. This is who we want to hear from. It's really a group effort. So thanks very much. And Lisa, thank you so much for coming back.
Oh,
And we'll look forward to seeing you this week with Andrew Watkins and with David Pepper again.
yep, I'm excited for those conversations. Thanks everybody for being here and thank you, Susan.
Thank you.